Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Spokane County Planning Commission. Today is September the 14th, 2023. It's 9 a.m. The first order that we normally do is introduce our commissioners. But before we do that, let me just make a couple preliminary remarks. First of all, the public may participate in person or remotely utilizing web and telephone conference links. Punch number *6 to speak. Individuals are limited to 1 3-minute comment period during the meeting. Please keep your comments specific to the current agenda item. Chat is not supported. I'd like to introduce the commission, starting to my right. Logan
Camp-Boreali.
Melissa Whitstruck.
Clyde Haase.
Pete Rayner.
Stephen Pohl, your chair. Pete is our vice chair. First order of business is this is the part we call the open forum. This is the time when the public may comment on any item not on this current agenda. So we've published an agenda. If you want to talk on that, we have a provision for doing that. But anything that is not on this agenda, now would be the time to come up and address the commission. And we'll look to the audience, and we'll also look to the web. Is anybody? I have a yellow slip here. Paul wants to spot, and this is going to be on. Okay, it's not on the thing. So, Paul, you want to come up and talk?
No, it's pedestrian plan. Later.
Later. Okay, we'll do it later. All right. Anybody online have a hand up? Who's online? Anything? Okay. First order of business, have a workshop proposed 2023 capital facilities plan, chapter 7 amendments. I'll let you take it away, Scott.
Good morning, commissioners. Today is one of those days we look forward to every year, where we start to wrap up our comprehensive plan cycle. I hope everybody has their coffee and a pastry and buckle up. We'll go through these over. There's, as there is most years, there's quite a lot to go through. We will do this, and this is an informal session. So, Mr. Chairman, you're welcome to take comments from the public at any time on individual projects. We don't have to wait to the end. Also, deliberations from the commission will be recorded and taken into account for questions that we will bring back to you in a final report. Now, October 12th will be when the commission will be holding its public hearing and making a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. So what we have, annual package of amendments. As you know, the Growth Management Act allows municipalities, counties to make amendments to its comprehensive plan annually. They need to be considered in a group so that you can assess the overall comprehensive and collective impact of those amendments on the values of the comprehensive plan. This year, we have some recurring issues. We really have a group of things all under the umbrella of the comprehensive plan. We have hopefully the last amendments to the capital facilities plan. And this, just for point of reference, is technically still the 2017 to 2037 capital facilities plan that was found out of compliance by the Growth Management Hearings Board and was part of our settlement agreement in 2016, 2017 with FutureWise and a number of other plaintiffs. We believe this last set of amendments will bring that plan back into full compliance once the board has adopted. And of course, we'll see. There will be a chance for comments and appeals on that. Correspondingly, Chapter 7 of the comprehensive plan, which is where the CFP is referenced, has some amendments, and those are purely for consistency with the amended CFP itself. Two relatively new things, the bike master plan and ped master plan, that have traditionally existed outside of the comprehensive plan, but they should not. They should be part of the comprehensive plan. And so they're being wrapped into this year's 2023 cycle. You'll see an introduction for both of those. You, of course, remember you initiated those as comp plan amendments back in May. So those are coming back before you. And then, of course, we have the usual proposed actual map amendments by the outside parties, landowners before you. So to get started, the capital facilities plan, the chief amendments this year relate to defining levels of service more precisely and also for a wider audience. The one of the court decisions that happened earlier, rather than narrowing a definition of capital facilities to those that we believe in the Growth Management Act are capital facilities are defined as those that are directly related to growth and development. The appeals court, however, broadened that definition to say anything that was publicly owned by the county in the county qualifies as a capital facility. And so we had to broaden our levels of service to comply with that court decision. So you will see that. And again, a reference, what you're going to see today is a high-level summary of all of these issues. The capital facilities plan, both in a red line and a clean version, are on the web. They're posted. The LOS and what we've done is a concurrency analysis for the comprehensive basis for this. That is up there as a separate document because it's really extensive. And then you'll also see the bike and ped plans as well as the comp plans up there. So it was the levels of service, and then notably the 6 and 20-year plans. The 6-year plan is mandated by the Growth Management Act. 20-year plans, 20-year financial plans, while all of you are aware that we use a 20-year horizon for our comprehensive planning work. Doing a 20-year plan for capital facilities is somewhere after that 6-year plan becomes an exercise in crystal ball gazing. You just don't really know what's going to happen. You don't always know where those funding sources are. But yet this 20-year plan was something we agreed to do as our settlement agreement, and so we've completed that. And what it is essentially is a sources and uses of funds table that balances over both the 6 and the 20-year period to show the county's ability to fund these capital facilities and maintain them. And that is a much more robust thing than we've done before. The other element in our CFP that's different from 22 is a result of the legislature this past session, where Spokane County and King County partnered to add language into the Growth Management Act, notably related to capital facilities, that says in its simplest sense, for those districts that are not bound to plan under GMA rules, which in our world are the special districts of schools, water, fire districts, and so on, the county has no control over them. We can't compel them to plan in the matrix in the GMA world that we exist. And they have their own system for their own capital planning. Schools work on, kind of a capacity basis and so on. The legislature changed that to say, as long as we make a good faith effort to work with those special districts to bring that forecasting information into our CFP, if the districts do not give us full and complete information, if they're not responsive or something else, we are not held accountable for that. It does not count against us in our compatibility with the plan. So that's a change. And interestingly, more recently, because we have made such an effort to reach out to these special districts, most of them have become beginning to be good partners with us. I think we're going to have a good relationship with these districts going forward, even though it won't be in the formal GMA sense of the world. And here is chapter 7, as we've talked about, is simply making things consistent in there with the rest of the capital facilities plan. And as a note, one of the things you'll see going forward into 26 is a more robust, I guess, exercise of bringing the CFP on a basis into the comp plan on a more direct basis, even though the county does a capital improvements program every year that has to tie into the capital facilities plan. So there will be in the annual cycle of comp plan amendments, whatever that looks like after 26, there will always be a CFP update, because that will be where we talk about our concurrency, and we'll be able to tie that back to actual revenue sources that will pay for actually identified projects. The county has not done that before, at least in the basis that we can find. So it will be, in fact, because the CFPs have been so badly or so ill-defined by GMA itself, we think Spokane County is probably the first county in the state to take this approach, and it'll really be kind of a model on how to integrate capital facilities into growth management planning. The next pieces we have, the bike and ped master plans. Again, you helped initiate those. They're now back before you for consideration. You can see some of the obvious issues on why to do master planning for bike and ped. And notably, because we exist on the periphery of the incorporated municipalities, a huge amount of our work on bike and ped work is connectivity, making sure that we're connecting to the city of Spokane's network, the city of the Valley's network, and trying to make it as seamless as possible for those that live on either side of a municipal boundary. So the bike plan has 4 goals. And we've got a couple slides that have lots and lots of words up there. I like to show pictures and images, but we wanted to put some emphasis up to show you and our audience where things are. But you can see the major goals on safety, connectivity, equal access, which is part of our kind of environmental justice side, and then simply transportation options. Bikes, perhaps more than ped, for the county will also play a role in our comp plan as we talk about reduced vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gas emissions. If we can start to plan and build what we would normally call neighborhoods in our urban growth areas outside of our cities, there will be a better chance that people can walk or bike to work or go to a market or some other opportunity that can in fact have an impact on reducing greenhouse gases, no matter how small that may be. So the bike plan, here is some of the narrative on how it is being put together. They talk about the goal of achieving, low stress bicycle facilities and identifying, facilities that are missing and can be improved. There's some methodology behind this so that it's not simply a exercise in connecting maps. And then there was extensive public participation for both the bike and the ped plan. We don't have the details for you today, but on our web, we have posted a log of the comments received and where they came from and on what topic. And it was very why it was put together, and again, connectivity is a big issue here to make sure we've got sidewalks that connect to city sidewalks on the edges of our street, which I have heard as recently as this morning is still lacking on our south side. And then sort of a philosophical part of, why we should do this, because not all of our pedestrian activity is related to walking to a school or connecting into a city. In some case, do we have pedestrian connections to some of our amenities? How do we deal with connecting trails into our more scenic parts of our community? So those elements are in place, and I'll take a quick pause. I went through both the CFP and the bike and ped plans pretty quickly. Didn't stop for any questions. Anything you'd like to ask commissioners or from the audience?
Scott, I have a question for you. Going backwards, and again, I'm always thinking back when we had done the original growth management introduction. Our library districts, the funding at the county level is totally different from the city, and yet we're both in Spokane, and we can't even. I can't use the city, and and they are kind of operating in their own air at times. Mm-hmm. Has that changed in the last 20 years?
Not to my knowledge, but I.
Because that
don't
was a
have
major
direct
issue,
answer.
in my opinion. To unify and to have better funding and spread it out over a base for both city, county.
It's certainly an intriguing idea, and it's one that is probably more feasible than most special districts because there is simply
Right.
a library, county library district and, city libraries, as
Right.
opposed to city fire department and then 10 different fire districts
Right.
that you can't coordinate.
Right.
While that's not directly in our portfolio, it would be something that we will examine.
Well, there was
We'll
a
make a note and talk about it.
Yeah, there was a definite long conversation, and bottom line, both at the time, they weren't willing to even talk about it. I mean, so I was just curious after 20 years almost.
Andrew Chance is the library director for the city. He and I kind of were there together for a while, so we would easily want to approach him and say, do you have any thoughts about this, about being part of a bigger organization?
Because a lot of people don't understand, but the city is funded different from the county one.
Yes.
And it's all part of the budget basis, and that's what I'm just I'm looking for a more unified city of Spokane, or the county, Spokane, period.
Understand, and on a slightly bigger picture, we are very much trying to erase the at least metaphorical boundaries between cities and counties. This county comprehensive plan will talk about our cities. It'll talk about the need for a healthy downtown Spokane as being, probably the most critical element for the success of Spokane County is making sure we have a successful downtown Spokane. So we're trying to blur that boundary deliberately and create guiding documents that anybody can look at and say, here's how the entire metro area is shaping up. So the library idea would be a good one. Mr. Chairman, did you have a card from someone on the bike or ped plan?
We do. Paul Crop, like to come forward at this point.
Thank you. Paul Crop, 3311 East Donora Court, Spokane, 99223. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. If you'll, I'd like to respond to Commissioner Haas. The reality is that there was a movie in anyway, I have a library card that lets me take out books from both the city and the county library. I live in the county, as you know. So that's actually been a policy for a long time. I don't have any trouble checking out a book or reserving a book in either library. So go ahead and take a look. I think you'll find that it's pretty darn seamless. And the American Prometheus book was only available, oddly, based on the movie, was only available in the city. So I went down to the new Perry Street Library and got the book. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that indulgence. Pedestrian plan. I served on a stakeholder group that established the Complete Streets policy for the city of Spokane. I've served on SRTC's Transportation Advisory Committee. And I'm a member of what's called the Spokane Regional Transportation.
By the time we got done, it was probably close to 4,000 because your airline is included with all of that. And we've upgraded our fleet.
We have
What we will not comfortable with the cost of $59 to do that. We didn't do first class, so that's $150.
Was that a caller in? Was that what that was?
that was Lori. He dialed in, there she is.
She's muted.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the, Lori's the author of the pedestrian plan, right?
Jamie Hayes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Whatever. Well, the bottom line on on this plan is that it's a good start, but it's by no means complete, or it's not. I'll just leave you with two comments. One is that oddly enough, it does not recognize an already existing trails plan that is sort of owned and done by the park department. There is a Spokane County Regional Trails Plan that is being implemented and that's the way you get grants. That's the way you isolate projects to do that. This pedestrian plan does not mention it at all, which based on Mr. Chesney's comments is sort of odd, but it has other difficulties as well. The biggest one, in my opinion, is that it doesn't recognize the difference between rural and urban. Its rhetoric is all about it's all just one thing, but urban issues and rural issues are different for pedestrians. So it ought somehow to be recognized in this plan. It's not a matter that can be cured now, but it probably ought to be reflected in future editions because of the very distinction in the capital facilities plan. Capital facilities for pedestrians or pedestrian accommodations are either rural or they're urban. So I think that would be one feature to add to it. There are, I'll just leave it at that. The reality is it is, in my opinion, it's a first draft. It's a very good first draft. But the strength of the public participation for this plan is not matched, does not match that for the bicycle plan. The bicycle plan was well vetted. This one was not. When you read the text, you see that the survey was only responded to by 126 people. Out of how many Spokane County residents, urban and rural? Okay, anyway, good start. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I do have a question, and maybe it's not ripe yet. Going through the amendments, I know we're on the bicycle and pedestrian plans right now, but I did see several comments from WashDOT, from SRTC, from STA that the bike and pedestrian facilities were contemplated by some of the upcoming amendments were non-existent or insufficient. I just wondered if that was addressed in either of these planning documents.
I can't answer that directly. I will find out from Jamie, who is the project manager on these,
Okay.
and we will get that back to you, and we will post an answer to that on our web. That's a very good connection or good answer or a good question to make.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I guess I'm just curious if you had any responses to our public comment from Paul. Just is there a reason not to include the trails plan? Does it make sense to do that? And I guess I'm a little less concerned about the rural urban distinction, but if you have any response to those and why we didn't include those things, that'd be helpful for me.
Well, from my perspective as a planner, the word comprehensive means something. And sure, we should be able to be, you should be able to talk about how you can get from here to Mount Spokane, how you can get to Riverside Park, how you can get to Riverfront Park, and be able to do that in multimodal ways. Google Maps will show you how you can get somewhere using a train, even if that train goes thousands of miles out of distance to get there. So the ability of having that in a single source is a really good idea. As you heard about the comprehensive plan and the capital facilities plan, a lot of these have existed in their own silo for years, both at the county and in cities all over the place. We are trying both to bring those into a truly, comprehensive tent. But it's interesting to find out that sometimes we just didn't think of one that was out there, like bringing a trails plan into the bike and ped master plan. So we will absolutely take that under advisement.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Let's move into our more traditional fall pattern of comprehensive plans. And before we do, I want to take a minute to acknowledge the work of our staff on doing these. A couple of them you know very well. Sagan Neiman, who is sitting here ready to be skewered as necessary, and Bob Brock were both responsible for managing these comprehensive plan amendments. They take a lot of diligence, they take careful time, and they take a lot of hand-holding, or shall I say, coordinating with other agencies and stakeholders to bring information together. The group that you have not yet met was tasked at the very end with putting together a concurrency analysis for this that ties these more directly to the comprehensive plan. What you saw in years past is a table at the end of the document that said, overall, this will increase the need for firefighters by 1.2, or by sheriff's deputies by 0.8, or water, it'll say 300,000 gallons a day increase based on these amendments. This year, to tie that back to the capital facilities plan, the concurrency analysis looks at, okay, if there's 300,000 gallons of water a day, where's it come from? And does that water provider actually have the water rights to provide it? Is there capacity to do that over the development span of what's going on? And that's it may seem like an obvious connection, but it's also one that hasn't been done very often. And now we've been able to put that together. So let me have the new group of our planners introduce themselves for a moment, and then we'll move on. So.
Hello, Planning Commission and whoever's listening. My name's Tate Andre, and I was brought along with these guys to be part of the long range planning team to update the comprehensive plan to meet GMA standards. Little bit of background about myself. I'm a graduate from Eastern Washington University's Urban and Regional Planning program, and was also at the excuse me, at the city of Spokane for about a year doing an internship there. During the ending of their housing action plan process. I also helped my professor during my master's to look at housing issues in the city of Spokane and address some homelessness stuff, and work with the point in time count there as well. So a little bit about myself, and nice to meet you all. I'm sure I'll be talking with you more going into the future. Tate, T-A-T-E. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bongo Thompson. I don't know if I have a ton more to add than Tate did. We have a very similar educational background. I didn't have a ton to do with the concurrency analysis that these gentlemen did. I happened to be on vacation at the time they were doing it, so I started a little bit later. But yeah, mine completely went blank. But anyways, it's very nice to meet you all. I'm sure I'll interface with you more in the future. But yeah.
What was your name again?
Oh, Bongo Thompson, B-O-N-G-O. Yes, sir. Thank you. Huh? I went to high school at Mount Spokane, and then I was in the same program as Tate. We actually knew we were friends before, and it happened to work out that I was working with him here. But yeah, I went to the Eastern program. Thank you. Thank you.
Go Eagles.
Hello, Commission. My name is Michael Weir. A little background on myself, from Eastern, graduate from their planning program. And then I worked for the Coeur d'Alene Tribe for about 2 years as their planning manager. So looking forward to working for the county, and sure I'll see you guys quite a bit here. So thank you.
Hello, Planning Commission. My name is Joshua Warwick. I'm a recent graduate from St. Cloud State University with planning and community development in their graduate program. My undergraduate was in geography from Central Washington University. I recently finished updating the city of Davenport, Washington's comprehensive plan. And that has been a really great experience. I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be able to work here. This past month has been just a really great experience. Scott, Bob, Sagan, they've been wonderful to work with and helping us get along. I look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you very much.
Is St. Cloud State University in Minnesota?
Yes, it is.
Sweet, thanks.
You're welcome.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Graham Zickafoos. I'm also a graduate, Eastern Washington University's Urban Regional Planning Program. And I've excited to be working here. In the past, I've worked at the city, worked on actually long-range bike infrastructure projects there. I've worked with the city of Medical Lake, updating their parks plans, and excited to be a part of the comprehensive plan update process for the 2026 update.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Appreciate that.
We have a good team going forward.
You have youth.
Yes.
That's good.
Well, and that was a deliberate strategy. In my consulting background, we took advantage of being, in Madison, and my grad work in planning was at the University of Wisconsin. And so we would be able to grab sometimes the, 1 or 2 grad students coming out every year and build our consulting firm. So it's a strategy I've used in the past, but it's pretty unusual for a public agency to go down that path. We always generally want to find more experienced planners that come in. But in this case, since we're doing a comprehensive plan that has guide rails from GMA, but also needs to be really well thought out back to a blank sheet of paper. Our plan is just, it's good, but it's out of date. And so fresh eyes, fresh minds, ideas are something that we really wanted to achieve. And we're excited to move forward with these guys. Michael, of course, does also bring work with tribal background, and that's going to be a benefit given forward with both the Kalispell and Spokane tribes. Having someone that has some of the knowledge of the issues and challenges that go through in terms of tribal planning and development too. And as to St. Cloud State, my undergrad in architecture and planning is from the University of Minnesota. And so I told him, we won't hold this against you, but just so you know, it's, so anyway, that's our team, Mr. Chairman. And if it's okay with you, we'll jump right into the rest of this. So we've got, you can see the map, the various comprehensive plans. Again, as a quick reminder, there were a number of these, I think 17 or so, that were initially submitted to us. You and the board winnowed those down to generally the ones representing residential projects because of a priority. And so these are the ones that made the cut and are moving forward. They are, not surprisingly, kind of in our 2 biggest concentrated areas, the north side and the West Plains, with one over on the south side of the valley. These are the specifics, and the top 2 that you can see are coming back to us from remand, in some cases from the Growth Management Hearings Board in terms of 1604 and 2202, as you recall, last year was the mixed use project on the West Plains that the board remanded back after the SEPA was challenged and appealed. The rest of them are fairly traditional. And then 2 at the end, one was what we call a zoning correction, and that was 15. We'll get into that as we get there. And then 17 is the remaining piece on one of our settlement agreement responsibilities is to bring those plats into the urban growth area, since they were vested outside of the UGA, and they just for practical purposes need to be brought in as a correction to the urban growth area boundary. There are 6 criteria in the Spokane County Code by which you can amend zoning, and by convenience, we use these as the benchmarks for the comprehensive plan, because the process in Spokane County is, with the exception of mineral lands and mining, is that a comprehensive plan change comes with a corresponding zoning change. And so using these well-defined criteria give us a benchmark against which the plans can be adopted. SEPA, all of these went through the SEPA process through a checklist. We got responses, and you will see on each of the project whether there was a determination of non-significance or whether mitigated measures were required. Starting off, this is one remanded from 2016. Some of the Plan Commission veterans will remember this. It's a project on Waikiki and 5 Mile Road. The Avista power line transmission line corridor runs east-west through the northern section of that entire area. 22 acres. You can see here Whitworth Water and Spokane County Sewer. This was remanded chiefly due to deficiencies in the capital facilities plan. Now that those have been corrected, we're back. So the criteria for amendment, staff shows that this meets both criteria 1 and criteria 2. It is proposed as medium density residential. You see here that the frontage is noted, but it's also one of our criteria is it must be near services. And so this is within a mile of commercial services, less than a mile to public open space and schools. And the note here, the remand conditions have been met now that the capital facilities plan, and this actually refers to the 22 capital facilities plan amendment that you processed last year and the board adopted in December. That fixed this issue, and so this is now compliant with that, and so we're moving it back forward onto the projects. SEPA, there are going to be mitigations on this. You can see at the bottom, there are going to be development limits, and that's a building and planning issue, access limitations, traffic mitigations, and transit from that side. We will likely use a development agreement to talk about those site development issues and generally give you kind of an overall preview. And again, all of these are in much more detail in the staff reports that are posted online. The developer had previously agreed through the SEPA process that they could build 99 units with a single access off of Waikiki Road. If they wanted to build their full plan of up to about 300 units, they had to have a second access. And that's both a building issue and a fire issue. That second access would likely have to be off of 5 Mile Road. There's currently a utility access from Avista that goes up to a substation under their power lines. That if there's if there's an agreement that they could use that as an easement or something, that might be a solution. But if you move further west along 5 Mile, particularly outside of where there's residential on 5 Mile, many of you know, it becomes a very steep slope going up to this area. So putting in that second access will be a condition of those additional units, and whether that pencils out will be something they'll have to work on. 2202 remanded. This was a much, excuse me. This was the 108 acre mixed use project last year. And it had the beverage distributor to the west and the manufacturing to the east on the southern part off of Thorpe Road. Spokane Motorsports is up on the far west side of or adjacent to this. And there was an appeal to the SEPA determination that was found valid and sent back, and that's why we're in a remand. Subsequently, the applicant has reduced the mixed use request to 38 acres, which was the core or the center of their original project. And significantly, in a sense, what they've done is they've left light industrial buffers against the projects that were originally objecting to residential coming in. The basics, 38 acres, it's in the West Plains UGA. It is City of Spokane Sewer and Water Service Area. Excuse me. Again, this meets criteria 1 and 2 of the zoning code. The mixed use project gives really significant latitude on what uses you can put in mixed use, and that's something we're going to talk about as we redo 2026. What does that mean? Here, yeah, right now it's just kind of wide open. Anything from residential to light industrial, and there's no performance issues on how they might have to interact together. And so that was one of the reasons they shrunk this down and left this light industrial buffer around the outside of it. But it's in that emerging, changing residential zone on the West Plains. STA has their park and ride down at the Medical Lake intersection, so it's poised to have future transit service as that residential builds out. And it has some access to existing commercial. And by the way, one of the complaints, two major complaints that we've heard over the last few years from West Plains residents and part of these home amendments is they don't have access to parks, and stormwater management is insufficient. Stormwater management is being studied again, both by S3R3, the PDA. The county is working on a $5.5 million program to fix some of that stormwater management south of this site. But importantly, the county recently purchased a 10-acre parcel on the southern end of this that will be put in as a community park. And so the ability of having a fairly robust recreational activity area is now coming to fruition for these West Plains residents. Because the county used its ARP funds for that park, those funds have to be committed by this coming year 24, and they have to be used by 2026. So that park will come online much faster than almost any sort of capital plan for parks the county has done in the past. So that's really good news for everything that's happened out here. SEPA, usual, hate to say the usual suspects, but on everything that we've seen on the West Plains relates to the change from rural but planned for light industrial into planned for residential. So there'll be traffic issues, water issues, sewer issues with the city of Spokane. It's within their area. It's always a question of the cost and the expense of building new pipes and putting new facilities in. We will be adding a factor on their title to make sure that buyers of property understand that there is industrial property around them. So there'll be a title notice, much like a navigation easement, that's saying you're buying this knowing that airplanes are flying close by. Don't complain about the noise. Doesn't always work, but at least it's a notice up front that what you're getting into. And then some other archaeological survey issues that we handle. And then the mix of uses will come through in a final development plan, which will go back through us in the future. Amendment number 5, back on our north side between Country Homes Boulevard and Wall Street. I'm sure all of us know that intersection as you move north. It's just west of the Division Triangle. Currently a church use. It's being proposed to go to high-density residential. And really, I think this is a really interesting infill project. The idea of putting more residential onto a site that already has good access, has transit nearby. It's kind of a definition of infill development. Again, it meets criteria 1 and 2. The multifamily requirement, again, being near amenities, near services, this meets that. And then SEPA is pretty straightforward here. Traffic mitigation will be required just because there will be and more intense residential use that will generate trips. And the applicant has not committed to a use, but it could be both. It could be market rate multifamily, but the proposed idea is more of a 55 and older, or more of a seniors complex. which changes the traffic dynamic a little bit. Number 6, this is the one south of the city of the Valley. And as you can see on the map, the highlighted parcel is effectively, it's kind of the remaining piece of previous plans and amendments that have moved into medium density residential. You can see a project on the lower corner, the southwest corner of that is already built out in multifamily. And so this fills in kind of that zoning gap. In a very practical sense, it makes sense to be able to assemble and unify those sites and plan and build them more efficiently that way. It is certainly close to commercial. And you can see right across Highway 27, that heavily platted area that was previously owned by the cemetery. That was a project that came through building and planning last year. That plat project came through. And that's a result of the county's change in 2020 to allow up to 8 units an acre in the low density residential. And you can see that's a fairly intense platting pattern. So it's providing a lot of housing in a way that the county board intended by increasing the density capacity of LDR. So the criteria, it certainly meets 1 and 2 again. Residential goals. It has that commercial center right on the corner. It's got good access. It's got bus access, and then it already does have some sidewalk and pedestrian amenities in place. So again, this feels almost like fitting the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle together to allow assembly of site for multifamily residential use. It will certainly have traffic mitigation requirements. The city of the Valley is currently working on what that looks like. You'll have those specifics by the time we meet next. And it'll be presumably it will be perhaps intersection improvements to take advantage of the increased traffic both here and offsite. But we don't, what our staff is seeing so far is it's nothing unusual. It's just a matter of putting the numbers together and kind of figuring out what that's going to look like. Back to the West Plains. This is Windsor and Abbott. Again, city of Spokane, water and sewer. This is the kind of amendment we've seen at least for the last 5 years of this sort of continual densification of some of these lands. In this case, the proposal is not moving it from an industrial category into a residential. It's simply increasing the residential density from low density to a medium density residential. So again, it meets the 2 basic criteria. Like everything on the West Plains, it has generally good access to things, but not a lot of things are close by. This is something that we started to look at last year and just didn't have the capacity and time to fully put together an agreement with the city on joint planning. But this is something we're going to be looking at in the coming year and also kind of teeing up for 2026 is how do we make the West Plains, the Thorpe UGA, and technically it's like it would be the Thorpe Grandview neighborhood out there, but that neighborhood is geographically would be so big, it's hard to identify it as something you live in. But how do we start to look at perhaps incentivizing the market to start with a grocery store, to get something that can go out in this area to serve the residents on that side without having to drive to Airway Heights, Cheney, or Brown's Addition to Rosauers. SEPA, again, this is pretty typical. Again, traffic mitigations, and then everything on the West Plains we want to tag with an archaeological survey. Again, West Plains, and this is north of the Aspen Park neighborhood, which we were going to talk about in a few more minutes. It comes up later in the presentation. A bit under 20 acres, same issues. City, water and sewer. In this case, we are moving from a light industrial capacity into a low density residential. It's proximate to the LDR to the northeast. It touches that LDR to the southwest. And you can see the platting pattern of Aspen Park below which is what we've talked about last year of these residential areas that existed during a time when they were allowed to be produced in light industrial areas. It still carries the light industrial zoning, but it is essentially a residential area. And to the immediate south of that, and on the east side of Aspen Park, west of Spotted Road, is a medium density complex or medium density planned area. So that open space is not going to be a business use. It will all be residential. So it will fit in with their neighbors, even though on the map it looks a little bit more like an outlier. Again, it meets the first two criteria in our zoning capacity. You can see here that we've identified the urban services that are there. There will be some traffic mitigation, but as a low density issue, it's not as big a deal. And then SEPA will have these issues, and notably Cheney schools, which again, as a preview, will come up as we talk about the concurrency analysis and the overall comprehensive impact of this. 11, back on the north side, another what we might call an infill project. It is adding a high density residential area to other multifamily zoned parcels in the same area off of Hastings Road and with Farwell to the north. As you heard last year, residents who live on Farwell are very concerned about traffic impacts that would come to the north of the site rather than those that would go south up onto Hastings. And that's something that we'll be considering. So again, meets those 1 and 2. And then again, is it close to things as it was last year? Yes, it's east of major commercial areas over at Hastings and Division. It's on Hastings Road, Newport Highway. Will have significant access to what's going on with Costco and other things. So it's well positioned to be a multifamily site. And there will be a water issue as there was last year. District 3 had limited water capacity for domestic service. They have significant capacity for irrigation service, and they have been working with the Department of Ecology to blend those water rights into one that would let them use their irrigation water for domestic service. It seems reasonable to assume that will be complete in a way to serve these, but the concurrency argument comes forward at the time of building permits. So if that has not been solved by the time someone comes back in to file a permit, we will not be able to grant the permit. So that is an issue.
Scott, is that
Yes.
a question of supply or how the water's classified?
So actually Josh was working on, this is taken for the record, Josh has been working on that. And I believe the issue is less about water rights and more about the flow to get those sites served. And so this project at the time of permit may have some sort of conditions to help upgrade a system to get that water concurrency provided.
Okay.
But, part of the thing that happened last year is they did have, as Scott was saying, they had an issue with the rights because it wasn't labeled or assigned to the right usage.
Kind of a Department of Ecology issue as opposed to.
That has been, the water rights, at least according to them, has been clarified.
Okay.
But they're still concerned about the transmission, and I guess regardless that for this project to go forward, it's going to have that problem solved.
Thank you.
Moving on back to our north side, this is one from low density residential to high density residential along Mill Road in an existing LDR neighborhood, fairly large lots to the south and a more traditional subdivision pattern to the east. It generally meets these two criteria. It is near mixed use commercial areas. There are some other multifamily projects a little bit to the south, and there is no current transit service in this area. nothing unusual in the SEPA evaluation, fairly, in this case, because of the transition from a low density to a high density residential there, and the infrastructure is there, there's really not much to worry about on that side. Now, this is 15. This was the one we proposed last year to essentially right-size the zoning. What we're finding out is, as we're starting our work on the comprehensive plan periodic update, it's very likely we're going to change our zoning criteria and our development regs in a significant way, not just in creating a unified development code, but re-looking at what zoning means and how that happens, which is likely to have much more flexibility for landowners and builders in providing directions, so they don't have to go through this laborious comp plan amendment every year. And we see these little band-aids of pockets of development happening, but also looking at how development is working from intensity or for performance use, not just from separation of uses from low to high in terms of residential. The state, in its own, I'd say, a little heavy-handed way, is supporting this effort by mandating that in what's traditionally called single-family detached housing, or our LDR zone, municipalities must allow up to 2 ADUs, must allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes on what was previously a single-family detached lot. So if you're moving in that direction, it could be as many as 6 if it's close to a transit center. Effectively, that changes the whole rule for that traditional LDR kind of zone. And so by looking at it now in a more performance-oriented way, we can put both incentives and standards on how that will happen. So in the long explanation, it really makes little sense to go back and try to redo the zoning on these areas now when we're going to redo it again 2 years from now in a different way. So we're asking for you to recommend continuing this to 26 rather than pursue it.
Scott, I just noticed that this wasn't on our agenda, and just want to make sure that we're not being out of turn here, having a workshop on this item without it being on our agenda.
Okay. In the workshop format, we're fine because we're not asking you for action today.
Awesome.
Yet it's still an omission.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
We will take note of that before we come back for the public hearing. And then 17, these are the 5 mile plats, 5 mile prairie plats. This was the group that was proposed in, I believe, as early as last decade. My predecessor found that the plats had expired and wrote a determination to that effect during the time of the settlement agreement in 2016. The plats were proposed by owner to come back to life, so to speak, and they were taken to the hearing examiner, and who found that they were in fact vested and had not expired. And so among the inconveniences that made our settlement agreement plaintiffs group look at the county like, well, you didn't tell us about these, you know, what else are you being deceitful about? When in fact we the county thought they had expired, and that's why they were not considered a part of the original declaration in that settlement agreement. Nonetheless, we have them, and to come back into compliance, I think you would accept the obvious that since they're vested, they are platted, they are moving forward. It makes sense to include them in the UGA and include that population calculation in terms of our growth areas. It'll be attached to that small UGA parcel to the south. They are immediately adjacent to the city of Spokane, water and sewer. In fact, that little notch on the corner, the mid northeast corner, is a city of Spokane reservoir. So serving them will be straightforward. And so what we're doing to correct this UGA boundary is we have to balance. We can't just say, put them in because it's logical, because that changes the calculation of how the UGA is approached. So we have to, or at least the defensible part of this is to make it a correction rather than an addition. We have to go find a similar population and similar acreage and move it from one part of our UGA to the other. We talked about this a little at an earlier meeting, and we have briefed this with the steering committee of elected officials because it will be a UGA boundary change, even though it's a correction. And so what we've done, staff has identified a good handful of sites that had population allocations made to them in the 2016 land quantity analysis that led to the current urban growth area boundaries. And so they found about 386 persons that were allocated to lands that are now, that have either changed or will never develop as residential. For example, they're now county-owned lands, or they're city-owned lands, or they're Avista lands that are going to be used for electrical transmission or substation. So having a population allocation to those makes no sense. We can easily move those and accommodate that somewhere else. It is within, 6 or 7% of the allocation expected on the 5-mile prairie plats. We think that margin of error is reasonable because the 412 there is a very crude projection of 2.5 persons per unit. And who knows if that turns out to be true.
Scott, could I ask why
Yeah.
the cemeteries were included there if they have a 0 population assignment? Just out of curiosity, really.
I'll answer that. I'll answer that in a minute because it fits the next part of this. There's a population side and then there's an acreage side. And these are snaps from that 2016 analysis. And so you can see, for example, the one on the lower left, even though it says Bauer, that's property that is transferred to the YMCA. That will be built in a non-residential fashion. So that 180 population allocation can move somewhere else. The Avista project on the West Plains, and we highlighted only one parcel there. It's actually 3 that adds up to about 75, 74 persons. And then what's called the Combs parcel out here is owned by Spokane County. And so that will remain as park and open space, and therefore those 43 persons can go. And so these are just 3 of those examples we used. The second part of this is you also have to have geography too, involved. And so we had to find 88 acres that could be moved into the urban growth area and literally taken out of the urban growth area somewhere else. The Greenwood and Riverside Memorial Gardens in the city of Spokane, again, fairly straightforward, are not going to redevelop as residential anytime soon. And by taking that acreage out, they're not, and also because they're not going to be developed, they're not going to require urban services. Taking the acreage out carefully means there's still urban growth area to the north and the south of that, so that if the UGA does push west, it can still be contiguous and be attached ultimately to the city of Spokane. So we're not disadvantaging the city in any way here, but it does allow a fairly substantial change of acreage. We need 88, there's over 200. We can potentially use that other 120, 118 or so to accommodate growth in this future urban growth study that you'll be seeing and hearing about in 2024. So that's how 17 comes together. And here you can see those parcels, the urban growth areas. It doesn't show up quite here, but both on the south of that and the north if it grows out into that direction, the city can still stay attached to it. Yeah.
And oops. You mentioned the population and the acreage sides of the equation for the FTA. And I'm pretty sure Sagan went over this when he gave us our intro to the LQA. But some of those uses do have service requirements associated with them. The YMCA, for instance.
And those will stay in, those lands will stay in the urban growth area.
Okay.
We're simply, that's why we separated population from land.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was remembering that
Yeah.
was a few months ago.
This is the only one that the land itself would be de-designated as, rural traditional or some, probably the same zoning, but it would be taken out of that UGA capacity. All of the others stay in.
The UGA would be way more complicated if we had to count dead people too.
Yes, it would. So, the bottom line for all of these is, for your consideration and the boards, is how do they work together? As I alluded to earlier, rather than create a table that shows raw impacts or gross impacts, we've done that and now allocated that back to the capacities and the levels of service and the ability to meet those demands by city, county, and other service providers. That document is a standalone document rather than just simply attached to the comp plan amendment reports. Is on our web. It is very detailed, and this is the concurrency work that our new planning group put together over the last, couple of weeks. We're just going to put up a couple of examples for you today to show you how it works. First one being wastewater. You can see the comp plan amendments on the side, and here they're broken down by who is providing that service, whether it goes to the county's facility or whether it goes to the cities. And in the CFP, you heard this, but one of the unique things and practical parts is the county and city facilities are tied together. So as growth happens, if growth happens fast enough that the county's facility or in county served areas and the county facility can't expand fast enough, it can go to the Riverside facility for the city where the county owns, a 10 million gallon a day capacity. The county's facility was designed to be a modular facility. It can grow in 4 million gallon a day increments in pods. And right now, and you'll see it has capacity, but if we hit a surge of growth in the 2 or 3 years it would take to build another pod, the county could handle that capacity. So it's a really versatile facility. But you can see here, the potential dwelling units using the existing zoning under the comp plan change zoning, and the change in this case of wastewater down to whatever it is there, 140,000 gallons a day total split between the two facilities. And then what do they have for capacities? There's actually the third one, which is really small. But you can see it has the current capacity is well past where we need. So we've got still a huge reserve in gallons per day. Over 5 million gallons a day. So concurrency argument here is yes, there is a capital facility that can support all of these projects together at their planned densities.
Scott, could you point me where this is on our website or tell me where it is? Do you know off top?
It's posted right with the CFP. I'm sorry, with the comp plan amendments.
Okay.
And then we put in one for the special districts, again, as an example. And a reminder, these are the ones that we don't control, but do have influence on development, in this case, schools being chief among them. So showing our projects here in 3 school districts. And you can see the district changes at the bottom. And what this shows is all of them will have these capacities. However, when you look at them, Cheney shows a deficit of 38. And again, this is order of magnitude math, but they show that these projects collectively would be more students than they have capacity for. So the math shows that our contacts and our communications with and from Cheney also suggests that this is not a debilitating number. They can handle this through modular units, through planning, through some attrition of students from time to time. And so that letter, attesting to that fact will also be attached to this. But I wanted to show you this because it's showing that our concurrency analysis and the methodology is working. We're finding areas that we in the past we would have put before you and said, the school will work it out, or they didn't respond. You know, that was the classic one. They didn't respond, and then no response mean they're acquiescing to the project. Well, we're building good relationships with these districts. They're responding, so we can know what their capacities are, so we can do this kind of analysis for your deliberation. But like I said, in this case, while it shows a deficit, we have documentation from Cheney that they have a process by which they can handle that.
Scott, has anything changed in relationship to the school district responding or not responding and it impacting our ability to plan anyway? If that makes any sense.
The answer is yes. We moved schools into a direct concurrency last
That's
year.
something we've done, but I mean, as far as state law is concerned.
Oh, I don't know anything from the state's perspective,
Okay.
Pete, but from the local one, we made it tougher.
Well, I think it's great. I just.
Because of in this case, if Cheney came back and said, no, we have no plans, we don't, and the reason they can absorb this is they have lands that they've purchased, they know they can build schools on, and they've got agreements with other parts like with Airway Heights and others where they know they've got a future to build capacity to do this. So they're saying this doesn't worry us. If that weren't the case, a project like this, because we've moved it into direct concurrency, would not be able to get building permits until that school could say, yes, we can handle the students coming in. So we've given the school by inviting them to talk to us, we've given them some control over development that's happening in their areas.
Scott, I do have some questions about this, these particular calculations, because I read the letter from Cheney School District, and there was an article in the paper not too long ago also that said, because of development on the Airway Heights, they are going to need to build some new schools,
right,
and they would have to pass a bond to do it, which that's kind of saying, well, we hope it'll pass, but particularly around Snowden and Windsor, I think it is, they're saying, no, we don't have the sidewalks we need. We don't have the safe routes to school. We do have students in portables and have for some time, and we really don't have the ability to add more kids into those two schools on a portable situation. And they're betting that they'll be able to pass a bond soon in this environment. I just wanted to say, I mean, I see what this says and the deficit sounds low, but
I think I guess I was thinking about that too. And I guess I would just say that I think that their initial letter was based on all of the projects, the cumulative impact of all of the projects. And if I'm not mistaken, a good number of those projects didn't make it through to this phase of the comp plan amendments. So I wonder if that's changed their concern, knowing that it's less projects. And so, yeah, it sounds like you have another letter, Scott, that you could share with us, or we'll have another letter to share with us.
Yeah, can I chime in real quick? I'm used to more formal public hearings than we necessarily do here in Spokane County. The Cheney School District met with us early in the year, and we told them that we don't get comments from their agency ever on any of our projects, and we'd like that to change. So they have provided comments on the specific SEPA circulations, and I wish Bob was here because they are his projects, so he has more intimate knowledge, but they did provide mitigation that Bob's prepared to put, in an enforceable SEPA mitigation, to help with these concurrency issues.
Thank you, Sagan Neiman, and that was excellent, and that's for the record, just so everyone knows.
No, hang on. That's okay. I think Sagan answered that. But Logan, your recollection is accurate. When these first projects were previewed, Cheney said, we can handle this one because we can bus these to our facility in Cheney while we're still working on building a new world. But another project that was proposed down by the golf course in Medical Lake, they said, we can't handle this. We just simply can't handle this. And that caused that to be dropped from consideration for this year.
Thanks, Scott. That was my memory too. Thank you.
So we take this as as a really positive change that we can understand better what's going on with our special districts that plan in different ways than we do. Schools, it's very difficult for them to forecast growth when they live in a world that they literally have to push themselves out of capacity to say, now we can justify running a bond on this because we can show that we've got no room left, as opposed to let's run a bond for a school that we're going to build to understand the next 20 years of growth, and it's going to sit mostly vacant for 15 of those years. That would be a very hard bond to pass. So they exist in a different world. Finally, here's our timeline. It is again, it's incredible to believe that we're already here in the middle of September. But this is what's happened, both your actions, the board's actions. We are here September 14th. These will come back to you October 12th for public hearing, and they are scheduled to then go to the board with your recommendation on Halloween. So that will always, now if we have a full moon, then we'll have a really interesting session with the board. But anyway, commissioners, that's the long and short of it. Ella will check and see if we've got any other public comments that may come in, but we're open to questions about any and all.
In regards to the items that are on the agenda to be considered, will we, the planning commission, be able to have more discussion prior to the public hearing? Is that going to happen today? I mean, some of these that you proposed to us, I have a lot of questions, and I didn't assume that was the timing was.
We get paid to be here all day. So the floor is
I'm
yours.
just asking what the agenda is. I guess that's.
Yes, today's workshop is wide open, and we will take, we would like to take as many questions from you and public attendees as possible. That way we can address those more directly and bring that back to you as the public hearing opens on in October. You will certainly be able to see all of the comments received both through the web and telephone, mail, and the actual testimony at the public hearing for your deliberations on the 12th before you make a decision. So yeah, but today was designed to be totally open-ended for your questions and questions and comments from the public.
You want to go first, Clyde? Because I've got one.
No, go ahead. You're on. I'm just a filler in.
Could you just maybe run us back to the two remanded ones one more time? Just because I feel like it's the first time I heard about them, at least for me, because then I'm a new commissioner, but I guess I would just like to look at those two again. If you could just run the PowerPoint back to them, that would be awesome.
Here, I can get it out. I got it. Since I have your mouse. Watch your eyes. It makes everybody seasick. Okay, so this is the first one. This one was found insufficient by the Growth Management Hearings Board in 2016 or maybe 2017. I don't know precisely.
So just to clarify first, Scott, it went through like all of the process that we're going through right now for our 2023 ones. The board passed it, and then there was some sort of appeal or something like that. Okay, sorry.
And the appeal was based on that the county's CFP was insufficient and could not document concurrency with this project.
Was there a particular element that they were focused on, or was it just sort of more generally?
No, I don't recall specifically. But that did come from the hearings board itself that was remanded back. And the cure for that is to fix the CFP. The project itself has not changed in any way since it was presented in 2016. So the SEPA remains valid. Other issues remain valid. Once we've cured the capital facilities element, we can take this forward again.
Didn't we here at the board, we were presented by the proposal of what was going to happen, what could happen without changes, and then what was looking for the long range. And I'm trying to figure out how that ended up, because 5 Mile Road is the only additional one within reason.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm just trying to recall, Mr. Chairman, how did we, how did we end up on that one? That was a tough one.
Go ahead, Pete. I have a question. Go ahead. Go ahead. Nexus to that whole thing was if they built that, the additional
Okay.
units, they had to have the access, and that's a hill if I've driven it.
If,
Right.
And there was a fire protection issue with that. And then we talk about a locked gate or something, some sort of a thing.
Something, yeah.
right, and I can show you a little bit here. We don't have a site plan, but if you can see, the mouse, the access for the first phase would be off of Waikiki coming in to the west. With both a cul-de-sac and then a future access going south for that second part of development. The Avista substation is here.
Right, yeah.
And Avista's access easement comes right along what would be this eastern edge and then up through. And so if there was an agreement with Avista or a change of some kind, this existing access on the 5 Mile Road could potentially be the second access to allow for more intense development on the site. Because as you move in this direction, this is where the slope gets really severe going up here from 5 Mile Road.
I think Peterson was in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is this is a heavily traveled road, and there's a lot of blind, turning.
Right.
Right. So that's a problem. So we were really concerned. We were really, you can see that with my tenants. We were really concerned about the traffic and the safety.
Yes.
That movement.
And that hasn't changed.
It's all very hilly here. This is a huge fall.
Right. One of the potential mitigations that was talked about is creating a sidewalk along 5 Mile Road, and that wasn't very popular. But there's acknowledgement that there are challenges to that. And one of them could simply be that this project is ultimately limited to 99 units because a second access just can't be done feasibly.
Is there like just an ownership issue with connecting to whatever that is, Forest Hill, or is that the challenge, or would that not be allowed?
This is 5 Mile Road. No, I don't believe there's technically an ownership challenge there.
Okay. But there's it would potentially be possible to connect to that Forest Hill Drive to the north.
No,
okay.
there's no connection in this direction. It would be connected to Waikiki Road here.
Got it. Okay.
Right about where that parcel number is. And that would be an east-west drive into here. There's, I found recently, there's been some prior discussion at the county about a more major east-west thoroughfare following the Avista transmission line that would take advantage of this project and keep moving it to the west. But that doesn't show up on any transportation 6-year plan or anything else. So maybe a wish list idea.
I was involved in a plat west of that spot on the power lines. And we heard that it was a beltway that would take people from the north-south freeway through 7 Mile to the airport.
Right.
And I don't think it's flying any higher today than it was 25 years ago.
If that's the one, then I do remember that from being across the river. Mike Taylor, the city engineer at the time, talked to me about that. There was corresponding beltway loop around the west side.
But the other thought, I thought there was some consideration about coming out to the north. And I can't tell you where, but because it doesn't go far enough. I thought there was some possible option they were looking at, then they were hoping on that to get past the 99 lots. But we were unanimous that taking that blind access point for the subdivision that we replaced off 5 Mile Road was a requirement.
The site plans that I've seen, which are sort of irrelevant for our discussion, this is a non-project land use action, do not show any future or possible connection to the north. They only show the east-west connection and then one to the south. And even that site plan does not show a use of the Avista Drive onto 5 Mile Road.
I think what I recall, Pete, is that to the northwest of that Avista property, there's a which ties into, I think, was that St. Charles down there? To the northwest?
Lloyd Charles.
Lord Charles.
Up here.
But that was a possibility that there was some thought, conversation about it, and I think that's maybe what you're referring to. But again, I would agree with what the comments have been. The Avista easement feeding that property is just, it is and especially with the traffic coming downhill, until a 5 mile is addressed, I mean, that is a nightmare, period. That's my,
If I could add a little clarification here. When this went through the legislative process before, you folks, this planning commission made a recommendation that 5 mile not be used as an access for this proposal.
Right.
And that recommendation was adopted by the board in the resolution that approved the previous one. And so nothing has changed. 5 Mile Road is basically off the table as an access per the resolution that was already adopted by the board.
wasn't there some, Robert, wasn't there some conversation that with the improvements being done to Waikiki, this would make the 90 some lots or the 90 some units? It could happen pretty easily because of the new improvements that were shown.
Oh, absolutely. The site would be
that has been
totally
done?
developable to 99 lots with a single access on
Right.
Waikiki.
Because the fire department had a big issue of going in, we would have to create a hammerhead and we had big rocks, some enormous haystack rock, or what do you want to call them, on the site that created some real issues too.
Well, I think what we've seen is there's a conceptual site plan for this area that was done by an engineering firm, J.R. Bonnet. And it shows the road coming down to, entering the site, coming down to Waikiki to the east. It's kind of serpentining up the hill and continuing on through the property, because the Public Works Department believes at some point there will be an east-west thoroughfare through there. They've requested that roadway be a public roadway. And there's a cul-de-sac bulb shown in the conceptual site plan. And then from there, the access to the site would go to the south and into the site.
Let me just chime in here. Looking at the hour, it's 10:30. If that accept, the new chair would like to move for a 10-minute recess.
Second.
All right, no, just without objection. All right, so order 10 minutes, please. Do you want to just move around on these things or just kind of take them into session again? Logan was starting back on the remand and we're still on that. But
Do you want to call us back into order?
whatever you want to do. Are you ready? Yeah. Planning Commission is now back in session. Scott, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you asked about. Logan asked about 16 and 04
yeah.
and 2202. We'll keep going on that discussion, but any questions about any particular amendment we can take in any order that you're comfortable with.
I have a question of clarity for my own mind.
Sure.
I'm having a real challenge here. 16, and I'm going to speak to that one again, and this is my question. When we have forth a discussion on the 12th of October, 11th, whatever it is,
12th.
for public discussion, and we go to vote, what are we going to be voting on at that time?
It will be analogous to what we did last year. There will be a single motion to vote to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners an amendment to the Capital Facilities Plan, Chapter 7, Bike Ped Plan, and CPAs.
Okay, and by doing that, I feel only part of the work has been done in regards to number 16. CPA 16.
Right.
Because we solved part of the traffic problem through the new improvements at Waikiki, but beyond that, nothing's been solved. That's my question.
Okay.
I just want to understand what I'm going to be voting on and
Certainly.
don't look so stupid as I
What
can be.
What we will, and that's partially why we held this workshop, a month ahead of time, is to get issues like that and be able to address those in some detail before we come back to you in October. Bob is managing that project. We will look at the mitigating circumstances. We'll look back at the traffic and we'll look at the recommendations from our own traffic people and DOT. Be able to bring those to you to say, here's what we can handle, here's what has to have a second access, or this is the limit to the project. And in one sense, if there were one or more of these that you disagreed or the commission decided it did not support in some way, we would pull that one off and the motion would be to support the other group, the group of those that you were comfortable supporting as a whole. We're just trying to make that simpler than having to vote through 15 motions.
My last question then, will we be voting on each one of those and not collectively of all of them at one time?
The idea, no, by kind of, if we take GMA at its word and you have to consider them collectively, you have to look at the impact of each of them, you would be voting on the group. However, if there's one, this is what we did last year. If there's one of those that you didn't support for some reason, we would pull that off and like a consent agenda, CPA 2305, there doesn't seem to be a consensus of support. Let's put that over here. And then we would vote on the others. But the idea is to look at them as a total, look at them as this comprehensive impact as a group.
I guess I need a lot of help then.
That's what we're here for.
I guess I would like some more clarity at the next meeting on what specific aspects of the CFP were found to be deficient for this specific project and how do we address that in the CFP. That would be helpful for me. I'm also just reading through the SEPA checklist, but I'm curious, I don't see it. It's a big file, so it's a little challenging, but I know there's some archaeologically sensitive stuff in this particular area. And so I was curious if DAP had commented or what section 13 of the SEPA said, but I'm working my way there now, so may have additional questions.
Okay, other questions on 16 CPA 04 or CPA 1604? Logan, you mentioned also one from last year, 2202.
Yeah, that would be helpful again. And I'm sorry that you had already gone through these, but just since it's my first time hearing them, it's helpful for me to go through them again. And that one's West Plains, yeah? Okay, yeah. Oh,
so.
Okay, yeah, this one.
So this was last year, and last year's project boundary, again, they won't be able to see this at home, but on our boundary, considered all of these lands, including this piece that came down to Thorpe Road, up over here and around 108. It was 108 acres.
And could you help me
That's what-
orient myself a little bit? Would you put
This is
Spokane?
here's
Motors-
I-90
Right, and then where's Spokane Motorsports? Is that weird shaped parcel there?
right here, right where the mouse
Oh, right
is.
there. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
And this is Odom, the brewery, the beer distributor, beverage distributor. And this is the manufacturing facility here, and they own this parcel as well. Their contention was, we want to be able to expand our business, and now you're building residential on two of our borders, and they're just going to call and complain about noise. And so what the applicant's solution is to withdraw that mixed use and leave these as industrial uses and essentially build a 200 or 300 foot buffer that could still develop in a light industrial use, which would be more compatible to their neighbors. And then focus the mixed use, which is primarily multifamily with some amenities, into this 38 acre parcel that was the kind of the whole of the donut, so to speak, of the former 108 acre parcel.
Didn't we have a proposal in front of us of zone change and use on 118 acres just to the east of that? And it was by the Schimmel family. It was
Well, this is it.
Oh, that is it.
This is
I'm just
this
asking
is
for
Schimmel.
names. I'm sorry. I gotta.
Yeah, this is the Schimmel property.
That is the Schimmel property.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I've heard some concerns, rumors. I can't give it any more credit than that there are planning issues with mixed use that would mandate a percentage of commercial or some other, you mentioned amenities, in the mixed use. And I'd like to know if there's truth to that, well, where's this going? Because my concern is it takes rooftops to fund retail. And is that an issue that's going to be addressed, or?
I'll let Bob address this directly as he's managing this project. We use a kind of an algorithm to calculate benefits that assumes the majority of a project, and I don't remember if it's 70 or 80% will be residential and the rest will be commercial of some kind when we're looking at water and traffic uses.
Okay.
To my knowledge, there's nothing in Spokane code that mandates that. The mixed use is totally wide open, but Bob?
Yeah, sure. So with this proposal, the developer has agreed to limit the site to 648 residential units. And that was, and they said they would do that, and they were willing to do that in the form of a developmental agreement. And so that's how the site was studied. That's how the traffic and the water and the sewer demand was looked at. That and any associated commercial that might go with it. We have had discussions with the developer about, as Scott said, our mixed use zone. We don't have a tremendous amount of experience with it. And it might not have been envisioned to be put on a green field. We have a lot of places where it is applied, there are arterials maybe running through it. But so when you put it on a green field, it sort of changes the dynamic about it. And there's nothing in the code that says you actually have to have a mix of use. And so we were suggesting that to the applicant, that we would be looking at something that defined that there had to be some kind of mix of use in a developmental agreement for this site.
Is that something that's going to happen before we vote or afterwards?
It should be before, yeah. We would probably have some sort of a percentage identified.
But that's not something that's, I'm just trying to, is that even allowed to, in other words, if I'm coming in as a mixed use applicant, am I going to be blindsided by this? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
Well, I mean, this is a legislative act, and so you're basically asking for permission to change it to something that's not there right now.
Right.
And so the board can say, we don't even want to hear this.
Oh, I
At this
understand.
particular point. So it's not an entitled act, it's a legislative act. And I think what we're looking to do is make this compatible, but also meet the spirit of our guiding documents, which is the comprehensive plan, which says it's a mixed use site. We're anticipating a mix of uses on it and not 100% residential. I think the applicant is saying that there are many uses that are allowed in light industrial, and they will surround this site with uses that are allowed in light industrial that support it. But
So I drive on Indian Trail, and I've been there for 45 years. In the first 20 years, the Indian Trail Shopping Center was a bare piece of ground, but it was zoned retail. So it wasn't zoned for housing. So in this kind of a project, would his approval would be for, he'd have to have so many square feet left set aside for commercial, or how would that happen?
well, we're still discussing that.
I'm trying to
Right
figure out how
now,
that's.
right now, they're proposing 648 units of housing.
Okay.
That's the ceiling that they're looking at and that we're looking at.
Okay,
And you can easily do that on 18 acres of
So-
site,
okay.
even if you went to the 50-foot height limit
Yeah.
that on that
Okay.
site.
You're referring to that project?
We're referring to this site right here, this site. Yeah, mixed
But-
use, light industrial
Okay.
to mixed
Pete,
use.
to answer your question though, the mixed use zone is very broadly defined in our code. That's
Right.
an issue. In one sense, you could say it's very flexible, but in the other, it provides very little direction.
Yeah,
So in this case, what we had heard from the board in the remand was qualify the uses using a development agreement
okay.
in addition to the zoning and comprehensive plan change. And that development agreement would talk about the breakdown of uses and kind of the operation of the site. So it would be another instrument that the board would direct and say, we will approve this conditional upon a development agreement at the time of development.
Okay, and the development agreement is gonna deal with services. So that, I mean, what impacts sewer and water for 640 some residential units.
I think it'll probably just limit the site development and call for a mix of uses.
all right,
And the
okay.
rest of it, we can handle in a SEPA mitigation and MDNS for this. And the developmental agreement would also say, and everything that's in the MDNS applies.
So I have some questions on that. So there's no point in the applicant going from LI to mixed use unless he's going to do mixed use. And the goal is to get residential. And there's no developer agreement in place prior to approving this change. So there is no way to say, well, you said you would sign this.
Well, I don't know if the goal is to get residential. I mean, the proposal was for mixed use, so it's all allowable uses in mixed use. They are saying if we do residential, we will limit it to 648 units. But there are many things that are allowed in light industrial, including,
Also-
or in mixed use, including some manufacturing.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I feel as far as the public goes, this is the cart before the horse, unless it just stays in light industrial and says, I'm gonna develop under light industrial.
There's a couple things to consider. One is if they are proposing a use that is allowed in our code, no matter how well or ill defined, and they satisfy the criteria for eligibility on that change, we don't necessarily get to step in and say, but we want you to do this instead. We have to follow our codes and our laws. The development agreement, however, does give us some extra teeth to do that. And while that wouldn't be done at the time of the comprehensive plan amendment, it would be done in such a way that you could not pull a building permit until it was signed. So it would preclude any development on the site until a development agreement is agreed to by the developer and the county.
So once the change goes through, the developer is entitled to develop their property.
Yes, but one of the mitigations will be, there will be a development agreement before you can pull permits. And that's a tool that the county has used in the past, notably on when you go to a mineral or a mining operation, say, we're gonna do the comp plan, but along with the comp plan, you don't get a corresponding zoning change. You have to do that separately. And that zoning change will oftentimes be tied to, you must have a development agreement that talks about your operating hours and vibration and intensity of what's going on around it for your neighbors. So the development agreement tool has been used by the county in the past.
And I've seen them be used in different jurisdictions. They still have to be enforced.
Yes.
Okay, and this calculation for the impact of CPAs was 75% of the site in a mixed use is calculated at 14.32 dwelling units per acre. So that was a calculation that was relied on for the, as an assumption.
Yes, and that would be, Bob can address that directly. That was based on prior development patterns on what we generally see for that sort of residential density.
Yeah, I could add that was a preliminary assumption of what we had seen in that particular zone. And that was distributed to the various service providers for this, saying, here's a baseline of what we think we're going to get. Now, for water, sewer, and transportation, those agencies relied upon engineering studies and proposals that were based upon 648 maximum dwelling units plus a mix of commercial uses on the site. They had to start somewhere to come with some kind of an estimate for what's the future demand of this site might be on these services. And so that's what they did. And the reviewing agencies took that, used their own expertise and evaluated that and came up with a number of mitigation measures. Said, okay, if you put this intensity of use on the site, then we are potentially going to need road improvements at this location, this location, this location, consideration over here. And many of those included impact fees, or which is the city of Spokane is a in close proximity to this. And so there was also water and sewer mitigation impacts where they identified, here's the improvements that are likely going to be needed. And I believe they were mostly pumping stations, and they identified the potential cost of those and indicated that should this project go through, that the developer would be responsible for those costs.
And I read WashDOT's email to you August 31st. They have a long laundry list of concerns and mitigations that would need to be incorporated, including bike pedestrian change, interchanges, the impacts to the deteriorating level of service on 195 at Thorpe Road, to their red light entrance there at 195 and onto I-90, and it just falling to poor performance. And 195 is already a very threatening thoroughfare, I must say. So I'm sure that the applicant is aware of these mitigations that would be required should they go into a residential or mixed use true mode.
It was a very thorough transportation, water, and sewer review for this proposal. So, and this is a planning level review. So what would happen is if they propose a project on this, and say it gets approved, they're going to propose a project, there will be another SEPA process in which that SEPA process can then incorporate all the things identified in this earlier scoping as sort of a baseline for what needs to be done at a project level.
And this is in a joint planning area?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question, and Robert, isn't there another major ingress and egress to the north underneath the freeway that there was some conversation about, but it's not mentioned in here? Dunn Road or something?
You mean in proximity to this project?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you follow Abbott Road, which runs north-south along the eastern side of this project, if you follow that road along, it ends up by one of our other comp plan amendments, number 7, which is a multifamily proposal. And there's a road, Abbott Road, I think, goes right underneath the freeway there. And you can access Sunset Road. There's also a freeway exit. Here's a good illustration of it there. You can see it. It goes, Abbott Road goes basically underneath the freeway. And then
this is the Garden Springs off ramp.
yeah.
But I guess, because that was their point of conversation, I said, but we have another major exiting from the site, which is Abbott Road, if I can use that. And that was part of their comments when they were in front of us.
I think this proposal is being looked at back to 02 CPA at 22. It's being looked at as having access to Thorpe Road. The transportation planning is showing that there would still be access to this site through that narrow piece of property that comes down to Thorpe Road at the bottom of your screen. And there would also be access to Abbott. And I think there was even some discussion there would be an east-west access point. There is a road that comes down into Grove Road. There was some discussion about that being an access point too. So
It's 390 or 195 and definitely that was a real, not a positive thing.
it's a trouble spot for the county. Yeah, it's a transportation problem there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were talking about I-90. I mean, there's quite a few pinch points.
There's a few, and they were studied pretty well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was pretty impressed by the thoroughness of the transportation agencies that are looking at this.
Well, and they weren't altogether happy with WCE's, even their August update to or revisions with the 648 units or withdrawing a portion of this site from residential development. They were still saying all you looked at was one scenario. And we all know that the developer could envision something else between here and there. And the backups in the PM peak hour from Thorpe to 195. And again, that access to I-90 from 195 with the traffic controls onto the freeway are showing very poor levels of service with the PM peak hour. And how would you keep people from using it? You can't.
Well, it's definitely thought the interchange, this is right next to an interchange though. I mean, that's a high volume highway there, and it's a pretty nice interchange. Have you gone through that? I mean,
I think they just upgraded it with some
they put new roundabouts on
yeah.
both the north and south side of that Grove Road interchange.
Yeah,
It's pretty slick.
it's counted for in here, so. I didn't think you could tell that.
Not helping anyone.
Well, and you know, one thing to remember, while this isn't necessarily in our purview, is if there are residents anywhere, they will find the most convenient way to move to get to where they want to go. If Thorpe Road is going to be a continual bottleneck at the tunnels, they won't go that way. They'll come down to this intersection and go back on the freeway. Or they'll go up Abbott and cross underneath some other way. So while there are engineering studies and we want to account for them, there's also human nature. You know, you're not going to put yourself in a traffic jam every day if you don't have to.
I want to say that I think we got to keep in mind, we're a congested community. And wherever we put things, we're going to have roadblocks of issues and we're going to have to make sensible choices. And secondly, to Scott's point, when I go to the airport anymore, I get off and take Sunset Highway because I don't want to deal with the 395 or 195, whatever's intersection with I-90. I just don't want to. So, I mean, the customers, they've got access right there to Sunset Highway. They're going to take it. I mean, somebody wrote in a report, they're going to come down to Thorpe Road. I don't think that they're going to come down to Thorpe Road. They're going to take the best route. And whether they do or not, I mean, we don't have any perfect proposals before us. We got to find stuff that works to provide housing options for our people.
Got to remember the unintended consequences too.
No,
I mean, yes, indeed, people will look for their goat trails and they'll just shift the impact to another place. So I'm just trying to think holistically, which is what we're supposed to do about this proposal.
Exactly. Other thoughts?
I need some help. Great comments and questions here, and I guess going back a half an hour to almost an hour ago, when we come to the voting, we're gonna have to vote on the whole thing as one complete packet, and I'm gonna have, I'm having challenges to move forward beyond that, because I can't. Is that what the intent was, or what?
That was our intent, but that doesn't have to be chiseled in stone. We, notably, the Board of County Commissioners by law must anticipate the cumulative impact of all of these when they vote to approve or disapprove the package of amendments. That does not preclude us from saying, you know, this one has no support and we're taking it out of the package. So and I guess, you know, that maybe that's nuanced, and even though we don't have Jessica here today, I know she's listening, but the idea of if we need to assess the individual, you know, are we seeking consensus on individual amendments? If we have it, it goes in the bucket. If we don't have it, it goes over here, much like a consent agenda. I'm sure we can do that.
Have we exhausted 22.02?
Can I add something? If you
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
questions about any of these specific things that you don't think we've answered, just ask us and we'll either make sure they're in the staff report, or we'll come back and answer your question at the next time we meet on this topic.
Yeah, that's a very good reminder, especially if you think of something, as we most times do, 3 hours from now is like, oh, I forgot to ask this, you know, jot it down on an email and send it to us, and we will make sure it gets into the hopper.
So noted. Continue.
Others or other amendments?
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on the bone here, so at the next meeting will be public hearing.
Yes.
And that's when there'll be probably more robust commentary from all sorts of sectors.
Yes, and you know, we will, as always, we will package any comments we receive prior to that for your consideration, so you'll be able to see those before you start that hearing. But yeah, traditionally, most of it happens face to face.
My point is, this is a very important meeting today to try to ferret out any holes or problems or issues, and I think we're asked to address that forthright. Clyde?
Are you moving down the list? I have some concern about 2306 or questions.
That's fine.
The field is open. Let's, without objection. let's-
My
Carefully move.
06, you said?
06?
Yeah.
2306. On that one, when we did the original laying out of GMA and so forth, we had a major concern of traffic. Again, we have a main Highway 27, a main arterial, and we cannot continue to dump it onto Sullivan Road. And so what is in the great future of Spokane County of requiring road improvements or ingress and egress to Highway 27? Because now once we got another 300 homes to the west side of 27, I'm just trying to totally understand the impact of that road, which is Bellaterra.
You know, for this project, Belterra, I worked on that project directly to the south, and that was another comp plan amendment from 2018. That project was proposed to be accessed off of 40th Avenue and Belterra, one and the same in my mind, because they turn into one another. And that 40th Avenue and Highway 27 had LOS issues, and that's why level of service issues, and that's why that project got capped, if you remember. This project is going to be proposed through that adjacent apartment complex, so it will share a driveway onto Highway 27. That has been studied by WashDOT. They will also be providing access onto 32nd Avenue. Now, they're still working through some issues. There's some transportation analysis still being worked on between WashDOT and the valley. the comments that have been provided by the county have basically said, when you get to building permit, you're going to have to provide a financial contribution to affected intersections. So we have one mitigation set already, given to us. And they will have to work to either, the project either could be limited in scope, so those intersections don't blow their level of service standards, or the applicants are going to have to provide improvements. And that's kind of just where we're at with this project at the moment. They're either going to need to get one or the other, or it's just can't go forward.
Thank you for clearing it up, because that is and was then a major hangback why that was not included in the original GMA, was ingress and egress, because to the north of it, down to 32nd, the terrain is just virtually drop-offs.
It is, and there's going to have to be some massive grading on that site to make this work. The applicant knows, but.
So why are we challenging ourselves with, and again, I don't know.
I think the conundrum for me with this one is when, you do, I can't argue that I grew up in this area. I know how it works. There are traffic issues there. You see that line get longer and longer at 32nd and Highway 27 all the time. So you have these transportation issues, but then you look at like the goals and objectives of multifamily housing, and you have a grocery store within walking distance. You have a gas station, you have a bank, you have amenities, you also have pedestrian infrastructure on 32nd. You have a walking path along the highway there. And so, when I look at this project, I'm weighing both of these sides, right? And, I guess to me, it hits a lot of the multifamily items on the head, but it's just got to work through those transportation issues that we can't sacrifice. And I guess for a multifamily housing, the people that would eventually live there could ride the bus, they could walk to, there's a lot of pros to that outside of the transportation.
I'm not opposed to it. I'm very concerned about traffic, because I use it at least many times a week.
And we acknowledge
it's
that
not going to get any better.
It's got to get solved before we can bring it forward.
That was my point. And so that's why I'm asking these hard questions. Why are we talking about, I don't know. I think it's the egg, I guess. I don't know.
Hearing from you guys and your questions and clarifying points are good for us. And I think it also, when you come back to the public hearing, we have some of these items addressed, acknowledged, and maybe, I don't know what way it'll ultimately go, but there are at least ways for us to pinpoint to help you guys make a better decision.
It's probably important to consider that in these interstitial periods, I guess, between major updates of the comprehensive plan, we are reactive. We react to proposals that come in that are applied for these changes. When we're doing our 26 work, we're proactive. We're looking at areas that should develop and what's the capital facilities needed to make that develop at a multifamily density, which means this kind of highway or this kind of traffic control. And so that's the approach of long-range planning that we want to get back to. But when we're dealing with these amendments and these in-between pieces, we simply react to what's being proposed. And I think you were about to ask, why are we developing on difficult lands? It's because somebody wants to do it. Somebody thinks they can pencil out doing that giant cut and fill operation to get a flat site.
Well, back why we didn't include it was because the difficulties of traffic. That was really it's ideal to be brought into it. But that's not the only development. How many units could they put on that property, that site? About
that, we haven't got that number yet. That's what's being worked through. And so to go to hearing, we'd have to figure it out.
I assume it'll be a decent number in size, probably a couple, 200-300 at least.
The
MDR upper limit is 15.
Yeah, so they're not asking for
100 at most 160 units.
Yeah, it's not going to be as huge as it could be. The plat directly across that you guys see on the west side of Highway 27, that was originally a comprehensive plan amendment request, 2018, and they just couldn't produce the traffic mitigation. That project if it went to a higher density multifamily zone, it would have blown 40th Avenue up, it would have blown all that up. And I think that the answer was the applicants would have had to build a roundabout. And that's why it's still yellow on the map.
My question is down the road, because we had talked about expanding 40th to the west to help that out, but I don't know if that any.
I think it did.
that
If you
con-
look, you can see the final
Right,
platted
that's-
right of way. I think they
that's
made
what
them
I'm-
push it through.
Because that goes right through the old golf course. I mean, that was what it was intent was, but we ran into golfers.
If I may, I'd like to step back for a second. One of the concerns I hear, and this has kind of been a thread throughout the conversation today, is I have concerns sometimes that this holistic approach is used as a bureaucratic means to say no. That ultimately you can find a reason why it's not convenient, it maybe is not ideal, or maybe we don't have the entire answer for some particular project. And Clyde, to your comment as far as why are we looking at this particular land? Well, as at the state level, we have said that we're going to limit what land we're allowed to build on. So it's not that we've chosen to do this. We've been told that we're going to do that, and we're going to limit on how we allow development to occur throughout the state and what lands are allowed to. Some of that is, there are good reasons for it. Some of those perhaps could be debatable, but that's exactly where we're at. And my concern is that if we find bureaucratic reasons to say no, the unintended consequences are the ability to have a place to live, increased prices for a home, rental rates, and this directly drives people's ability to have a place to live and to thrive, and then build wealth for them, their families, take care of their families. When I hear questions of the staff about traffic studies, when they clearly indicate that this was a fairly high quality review and assessment, and that there seems to be concerns with accepting of that. I'm very concerned that this holistic approach is being used to say no to projects that we are in the areas where we're even allowed to look at supporting our community.
I mean, I'll just respond to that to say that we have a pretty clear, guidance that we have to look at it holistically, whether it's bureaucratic or not. I intend to follow that guidance.
Other thoughts about 06?
I'll bring my portion to the end. I'm not opposed to it. I just want to make sure that we follow all the guidelines and the concerns that we had years ago, and they're still here today and haven't changed.
Yeah, I think I'm having some challenges, getting from, I think a lot of us are like, how do you go from this initial planning action to what sort of mitigated things will be required when we actually go to permitting or to SEPA phase. And so, we are talking like, oh, these are the things that will be required. And I guess it's just harder to, to pen that in, or it feels harder to pen that in, which are the things that make me feel more comfortable moving forward with the project. So I'm sorry to bounce around, but on the last one, the West Plains one we were just talking about, I feel like it might be helpful for me to see like an example of a development agreement, which is what we've talked about would be necessary to move forward on that one. What would an example development agreement look like? So I could kind of get an idea of what's being promised in the future. I feel like that would be helpful for me on that one.
Understood, and we'll put something together for you. And Bob's already working on that for that project anyway.
Awesome. And it could just be like one, you said that maybe we've done it before, so it could be a previous one too, but just so or if it is like a draft of this one, that'd be great too, but just so I could get an idea and understand that better.
Sure.
Thank you.
If I could follow up on that a little bit, what happens with each of these is there's a MD&S issued for them, and that MD&S defines all the conditions. It lists every single agency that asked for a condition, and then it lists their conditions. And then we have the applicant sign those things, and then we sign them and then issue them, and then they're.
Do we pick and choose agencies' mitigations though? Like, so for example, on the one I was just talking about, West Plains, DOT has like 5 or 6 specific mitigations that we require or that they're requesting, do we just copy and paste those into the? Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Very rarely, I don't even know if I've ever not included a SEPA determination condition when an agency is requesting it.
Other thoughts?
Good.
Are all these projects that we're talking about I guess it depends on what's ultimately proposed, but what we're thinking is all of these would require SEPA ultimately, right? And all of these are going to meet the threshold.
If you are doing a legislative action, you have to do a non-project SEPA, whether you're removing periods that shouldn't be in the zoning text all the way up to what we're doing now.
So I do believe all of these will have an MDNS. All of them will have mitigation measures provided for by agencies. And that hasn't always been the case in the past. Some of these, they're small ones, we've issued DNSs, determination of non-significance. With all of these, we are going to issue mitigated determination of non-significance. That means they've been scoped by agencies, and those agencies have provided conditions that they think will make this not break a service level or impact traffic. They think these measures will mitigate this, and they'll be applied at project level when they actually turn dirt on the sites.
Yeah, for me, that makes me feel a lot better about, like, I am concerned about 22.2 for reasons we've talked about, but like them, if all of these things that DOT is requesting are going to be required, that helps me get to a place where I feel comfortable with that amendment.
Commissioner Camporeale, well, by we, I mean Spokane County previously would push studies, reviews to the time of building permit, and they would say, because we have no project to evaluate, we'll study all this stuff later, and it kind of left it at that. And we've actually had projects overturned in court because of that. So that's why we take this different approach. And even in my time here, when I started, we only reviewed traffic for concurrency at the legislative phase, and we just to make our projects, more robust in our evaluation, we've added the other concurrency items to our review and mitigation at this phase.
I just want to thank staff for their time and energy and care in providing the supporting documents and the reviews and everything. And I am well aware that we are not at the project level. This is what could be possible. What are these changes make possible without knowing exactly what is going to happen on the landscape. I do remain very concerned about the JPA and the West Plains and moving these projects forward without having that conversation with the city. And I understand you said you were working through an agreement with them.
But we continue to do that. Spencer and James Richmond provided a draft of an agreement a while back. We have been regretfully not getting on that as much as we are just because of our current workload. We're hoping to even brief our commissioners in the next month or so about what joint planning looks like in their minds, so give us some guidance in responding to that. So we were not able to use that tool this year. However, the city and county have been much more involved than perhaps in the past. Multiple meetings, multiple discussions about the West Plains project. So I'm comfortable that what we're presenting to you does accurately reflect what the city wants to see out there, even if there are some disagreements.
Thank you.
So. Other thoughts, other amendments? There's the summary. If anybody needs a reminder.
Melissa, I'd like to thank you for that last comment, because we're looking at kind of the 40,000 feet level of the projects. Whether they get built or not, there's a lot of conditions. And I hear everyone talking about that. And that's where the rubber meets the road for these guys. Our job is to take in consideration all the wonderful work that the county has put into it, And, if it makes sense and it passes some of those thresholds, here we are making that decision, but the actual implementation of those projects is pretty far down the road.
Could I ask on that note, like a mechanical or even a little bit of a hypothetical? So say we let's just use 2315 or sorry, we're just talking about 22.2. If so we say we're going to require a development agreement, we approve this change to mixed use, and then they sell the property and the applicants come before us with a different plan, also under mixed use. Would we still require them to enter into some sort of development agreement? So
Yes.
the development agreement becomes associated with that piece of property essentially. Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, it becomes essentially it's not quite the same, but it's like a covenant. It travels with the land.
I'd also add that so does SEPA mitigation.
And just a reminder too, while this level of planning is a non-project action, as bureaucratic as that sounds, when we're doing these analyses and when the agencies are doing these analyses, they're looking at a range of what can develop on there based on our development regs. So if a multifamily traditionally develops at just like 14 units an acre instead of 15, that 14 units an acre is what's put into the transportation calculus. It's put into the water and sewer calculus. So these analyses are looking at, well, not a specific project. They're taking at least the typical project that would be produced in those areas or the upper bound of that. I mean, what would be the most that you could do on this and what would those impacts be? And that was one of the things that got everyone's attention on the Amendment 2 last year, is the initial density calculation that Whipple engineers used was based on what was the maximum allowed by the ACZ requirements. And it was an enormous number, and it generated something like 600 million gallons of water. And it was never going to develop to that intensity, even by law. But that number got out there, and the city, logically enough, totally flipped out on that. We looked at it and go, what are you doing? And then when they backed that down to, well, here's what we really want to build, it became a much more manageable number. So the analyses try to take into account a plausible but upper limit of the intensity of development on these sites.
Could I add a point of clarification? You were talking about developmental agreements and the timing of them. And so if a developmental agreement is required as a SEPA mitigation, the map doesn't change until the applicant enters into that developmental agreement.
I think it would even be fair to say that the commission, if they identified issues, could make their recommendation based on a development agreement identifying or limiting certain factors.
Other thoughts, other amendments?
Exactly. There's a lot, I said there's a lot of meat on the bone here. Now's the time to talk about them. When you have your public hearing, there'll be opposing views. There'll be even more to talk about.
And we will produce a similar presentation for a bigger audience,
Right.
Answering some of these questions and outlining both the legal steps that have to be undertaken to work through these amendments and also the practical ones. So it'll be much like this, but augmented.
But we're kind of at the conceptual level, and we have to look at all of these based on our knowledge base. And so happy to entertain any further questions on any of these comp plan amendments.
I did have a chance to look at the SEPA for 16.4 and which is the Waikiki and 5 Mile one.
Okay.
And it does look like they said that there is no expected historic resources on the site, and nor do I see any comments from DAP, and I'm a little concerned about that. May just have been an oversight by DAP, or maybe DAP looked at it and didn't think that there was an issue there. So I would be interested if there was any comment from DAP, if you could double check. I know it's a long time ago now, so that may be a challenge, but I'd be interested if DAP had any comment on that site, just because I know there is some sensitive stuff there.
We will look.
But otherwise, I feel pretty good about these. I'm not, we're not voting today, but I feel relatively good about this slate. I'm most concerned about the remanded ones, just because this is the first time I'm having a chance to dive into them, but the rest of the slate I feel pretty good about, and I'm excited to hear some more specific details like on 06 and things like that.
Would it be a fair statement to say that what we are being asked to do is to enable a piece of property to become part of our solutions for housing and other growth, and without it, nobody's going to work on it because the process is too long and too painful and too uncertain. If we enable these properties to solve our housing crisis and our other crises and condition them, they become targets for entrepreneurs to come in and do something with them that solves those problems. And I think it's behooves us to solve those, make that feasible where possible. And it's not going to be perfect, but I think we do the best job we can, but it's easy to say no. It's safe to say no, but you don't solve problems saying no either. So I think we need to look at this as enabling. And a lot of landowners can't sell their property to the people who will develop it without it being enabled. So there was a question to ask about, will somebody come in and behind us? And that's going to happen if we approve it.
The slide we've got up on the screen speaks to that. Number 2, notably, that change in economic, technological, or land use has occurred to warrant modification.
Yeah.
So what we believe, or the way we act in here is we see ourselves as a growth agency, not just as a regulatory body. What that means is when somebody's proposing an amendment, that means there's capital being prepared to be put at risk. Somebody's willing to build something and is putting this amendment forward to move into a regulatory system where they can build. If they're proposing it on a piece of land that has not changed in 20 years of zoning, it kind of tells us that there's no investment pending on that piece of land. And if this one meets these criteria and serves the public interest, it warrants an amendment to our comprehensive plan. We fully intend the 26 version to be a little more, well, a lot more clear in how you can repurpose land without going through this amendment process based on intensities and relationships and other kinds of uses. But right now, with the system we have, those 6 criteria provide the flexibility we need to assess a piece of land and say, yes, we reflect that there's resources being prepared to be used on this land, and the land is laying fallow otherwise and won't be developed unless this happens. So it's a strong motivator to move these forward using our statutory and our code criteria and the requests and conditions put on us by the agencies that affect transportation, water, sewer, and other things. So agree with you completely.
I would have to go back and be thinking about it a little bit more. And I'm going to say this, the last few minutes, it has really helped me out to understand how willingful and the conditions that are going to be put on each one of these. And you folks are going to have to be the enforcer of it, or the carry through, or hold them accountable. And that means a lot to me, because accountability is one of the biggest issues that the public is always asking for. Accountability for allowing this to happen. And we do need to move forward, but we do need to hold the conditions.
Well, it's one of the 4 things that we do. We do long range planning, we do land use planning, plats, the first step of using the land. We work through the building permits with our building side. We evaluate the site for building permits, and code compliance is the 4th one. When we're promoting growth, it's to grow the county, it's to grow the economic base, it's to grow communities, hopefully build neighborhoods, not just subdivisions. But we have like that subdivision you saw on 6, across the street from 6. We have an obligation to those that have already invested, that are already there, to protect what's there, protect that investment, not just at the expense of new investment. And so, code compliance is a little bit of a tricky thing in Eastern Washington. We like to do what we want to do with our land and not have the government tell us what we're going to do with our land. But at the same time, if you're doing something that's not allowed by code and you're affecting the quality of life of your neighbor, then we have a role to play. You agreed to build here with this set of rules, and you need to know that. So, we're aware of that, and we try to do that as best we can on the reactive side, but also, and it's particularly as we have this chance for 26, to write that into our guiding documents from up front. So when somebody's doing land use planning, they see that we're trying to build neighborhoods and not just a plat that's isolated by itself. 8 units an acre, oh, I can do that. Well, 8 units an acre, but you need to blend in with your existing neighborhood. That might mean you're going to have to have blended neighborhood or zoning. These might be bigger lots and smaller lots. You might have to do something else. If developers generally know about that in advance, they can design and make that pencil out. If you drop on after the fact, they're angry because you changed the rules in the middle of the game. So I'm excited about being able to better shape our communities with our 26th version and get away from this piece by piece approach that we're stuck with right now.
If I could make one more request for the hearing, would it be possible to address the, and I see you did that mostly except for the remanded ones, but to kind of move the 2 remanded ones into the like general area, geographic area that they fit in, so that we can kind of look at the 3 West Plains ones together and also add the Waikiki one up by like North Mill Road or in Hastings. So we can kind of just try to think about them that way.
Sure.
That would be helpful for me. Yeah, cluster them. There we go. I don't really have any other specific questions on any of the other ones, at least not that are coming to my mind right now.
I see Mr. Rayner has voted with his feet. He's abandoned us.
I think he's been called away
I understand.
On the most temporary
If-
basis. He'll be right back.
If there are no other questions, we really don't have anything else on the agenda. I don't think you need to hear any more from me today. Our meeting schedule, we are going to be canceling the September 28th meeting since we don't. We're moving all of that to October 12th. So it gives us a chance to work through these questions, any remaining issues with the reviewing agencies, and then have those documents posted well in advance of the 12th for public review as well as your review.
Are you anticipating that October 12th to be a pretty full day, I imagine?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Yes, I think we went through this frankly a lot quicker than I originally expected today. But most of you have seen some of these things before. You saw the previews of these before, and I'm happy we got the questions we did from you, and we'll be able to address that. So, but I think we'll go longer on the 12th.
But I feel like the preview really helped. I know that's just all I know, but it sounds like that's a somewhat new thing. And I feel like that really helped me to not have as many questions today. First of all, like the commissioners took some off the board, so I don't have to think about as many, which helps a lot. Thinking about 15 is hard. Thinking about 8 is a lot easier, or whatever we're at. And so I appreciate that. And so on the next meeting, should we expect pretty similar sort of presentation with a series of questions, public comment, but then have an action item at the end of that? Is that what we should expect?
Essentially, yes, and generally, rather than we would propose to essentially, when you open the public hearing, we'll start with the CFP, and then we'll take testimony and questions on the CFP. Then we'll move on to the bike plan. Then we'll take testimony, rather than make everybody wait till the entire presentation's done. And that way, those that have issues that want to address fast or early on can have the advantage of talking and walking when they're done.
On that same note, should we expect, I kind of expected maybe there'd be some applicants today, but I don't see any applicants today. Should we expect that there's probably going to be some applicants here at this time, or their consultants?
I would expect that all of them will be here.
Have you had any inquiry from them yet?
Oh, we talk to them almost daily. Yeah.
I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. I also just wanted to point out that between now and October 12th, there's going to be individual mailers sent within a perimeter of all these projects. It's once they get those in their mailbox that they start showing up. So there will be a crowd. That just has not happened yet, so.
Could you tell me the notice requirements, just so I have in my head, like what is, or could you tell me in the future?
I can email you the codes.
That'd be great. Just so I have an idea of like who we should plan to
Yes.
hear from and
Yeah.
how far away they'll be from the site. That kind of
Yes.
thing would be helpful.
Yes, I can do that.
And I probably missed this, but I thought the gun club was coming back today. I probably just,
Not today.
I just corrected my,
No.
It was on the email, I
Email.
thought. Wasn't it on the
I
email?
thought so.
Well, I know that y'all provided the SEPA checklist to us, so I did take a chance to look, or at least to me, because I had asked for it, but so I did take a chance to look through that. But yeah, should we expect, or is there planned future action on that, or is it sort of
Yes.
on the side table for now?
No, it will come back to you. We've simply, the practical part is this is our busy season. And to get these pieces done takes all the horsepower we have. The zoning text amendment is being worked on and the analysis is being done. That will come back to you. Maybe if we have a last meeting in October, at like on the, whatever that would be, the 30th or 31st, maybe.
You and your staff have done a very good job on this, and the clarity that you brought forth here to help me out to understand it. But I think in the next meeting, I think that would have to be one of the first things, what you're going to be doing. We have to vote on these things all at one time, according to the GMA. We can't do individuals, and you have to give individual. They have to understand that because they're going to be concerned about their project alone. I don't care about him or her. How it's going to be handled, I think with just a clarity, it'll
Sure.
help this whole thing be a good agenda and a good
Yep.
meeting next time.
We will lay out the ground rules when we start in an
I
introductory.
think
manner.
that's very important.
And just to be clear, do I understand correctly that I understand we're supposed to address them together, but say just for whatever, it can't have a like consent agenda on, we can pull one of them out. If the majority still agrees to move that one forward, considering the cumulative impacts, can they do that? Or no? If we set it out on the side table, does it become stuck on the side table or can additional action be made on it? And maybe that's a Jessica question.
I think we have flexibility. I mean, the directive of GMA is to consider the composite or whole impact of all of your amendments on your comprehensive plan and on your community. It doesn't really direct how. We interpret that to say, let's take one vote because we've now understood everything and we've seen the cumulative impact analysis. But I know in the past, even when I was first here, we voted on every individual amendment and sent that slate forward to the board. And then if they choose to accept your recommendations, they vote on as a unit. They vote on the entire package. We can very likely satisfy GMA by doing that as well.
And they also have the authority at that time to pick and choose.
Yes, they do.
Commissioners.
If they choose, if they disagree with the planning commission in any way, which they can, they then have to back up and set a public hearing to talk about what they're disagreeing with. So if they didn't like CPA 2202, and it was in your package as a total recommendation, they would take that out and set a separate public hearing to consider that, much like you do. They do it. So yes, they have that flexibility, but they have to take an extra step of working with a public hearing.
Thank you for that clarification.
So you ask a very important question. So if one of these CPAs are judged not to go forward next time, what happens to the fate of that? Is this continues on, or
Much like the shoreline amendment that was not supported by the commission the last time we met, they will still go to the board as a package. That package would say the planning commission recommends approval of these amendments and recommended denial of this amendment. Again, if the board agreed with that entire recommendation, they would vote on it and that amendment would fail. If they chose to disagree with you, they could take that amendment, or they could take whatever it is that was the anomaly off the agenda, hold a separate public hearing and vote on it themselves. But regardless of your action, it will go to the board.
So just to
If you
clarify,
turn one down, if you deny it, that denial still goes to the board.
so for the shoreline master program, just for an example,
Yes.
the Board of County Commissioners received that package, but there's a cover sheet or something that says this did not receive recommendation from the planning commission, or there
Correct.
was no recommendation made on this from the planning commission. Your move, basically.
It basically, yeah. I mean, the votes recorded, it wasn't that there was no recommendation, the recommendation was denied, to deny the amendment. If the board agrees with that, they don't have to do anything other than accept your recommendation. It'll go on their 2:00 agenda and they'll vote on it, and that denial will stand. In the case of the shoreline amendment, it actually goes one step further. It goes to the Department of Ecology for a final step. So whether the board agrees or disagrees, ecology still has the last call on that amendment. Planning amendments are different. If the board, whatever the board does is considered legal and binding, short of an appeal.
There's another option that I've seen in the past where they will push one into another cycle to get more issues addressed, kind of like the two we've seen.
Which they did do that even with a couple of the ones that we were initiated this year, correct? They
Yes.
pushed at least one or two of those off and requested it be part of 2026 or
Correct.
something like
And,
that.
and as you saw today, one of our recommendations is asking you to continue Amendment 15. If they agree with that, that'll also get pushed into the 26 bucket.
And we should expect that so on the hearing, will 15 come before us will you be asking us to make that recommendation on 15, or will we just not have a recommendation on 15?
No, we will ask you for a specific recommendation to continue.
Thank you.
And depending on how it all works out, it'll either be part of the package or it'll be a separate one. But that will be a specific action asked of you.
Thank you, one and all. Any other comments about the process? If not, I'd like to move on to the approval of the minutes. Can we do that next? You have in front of you the minutes from August the 31st, 2023. Hopefully everyone's read them. They're in your packet today. If there's any additions or errors or notes that of changes, now would be a good time to bring those up. Otherwise, the chair will look for a recommendation to adopt these minutes as amended.
I'll abstain since I was not present.
Okay, thank you. So noted. Mr. Nolan is going to abstain since he was not present.
I reviewed the minutes and I move for their approval.
Okay, Mr. Campireal has moved to adopt. Second by Melissa Wilczek. There's no discussion on a priority motion like this. All those in favor of adopting these minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. Those minutes are hereby adopted, and this time I'll sign them. So you won't have to go through the DocuSign. Thank you, Ella. I didn't do that. The next item would be the staff report. Scott, you get to talk.
In the interest of brevity, I think you've heard enough from us today. Only to reiterate, we will not be meeting September 28th. We will be meeting October 12th for public hearing and consideration of these amendments.
There's a planning workshop on the 21st. Should that be?
Yes, thank you. The short course on planning run by Commerce is on the 21st, starts at 1 o'clock. Please get here a little early so you can get a good seat. It will be in this room. And it lasts about 3 hours. Correct.
Do we sign in as commissioners or do we not sign in or? what
Yes, it
this?
is. It is noticed as a planning commission meeting because you
That
were
was
here.
my question.
There's no action being requested of you, but you will be a quorum. So we are noticing it as a public meeting. The public can attend if they choose.
Can we attend online or is it only?
Good question.
I thought the ad said that it
It's-
is online, isn't it?
Yeah,
You're gonna miss
I don't see why we can't, but I mean, the idea was it will be on this screen and with the speaker here. I think it'll be harder to participate online.
I think we signed up as a planning commission as registered for this event and not as individuals. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Do
Okay,
we park on the street? Do we have a particular place to?
We'll
park?
get you,
Oh, okay.
Already?
Yeah.
What's the expected end time? And can you give me the title of it again? Just put it on my calendar.
it's called the short course on planning.
Right.
And it's facilitated by the Department of Commerce.
And I have sent out
To our email or
to your email.
I see here that our next meeting date will be 12th and October the 26th. That's the concept anyway.
Correct.
Okay. Nothing else to come before. This chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Logan. Does it need a second?
Second.
Second by Pete Rayner. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. All opposed by saying nay. We are hereby adjourned. It's 11:55. Thank you.
We did expect to go